I am Lobna Hassan. I am an associate professor at the university I work at is called Lappenranta University of Technology. So they have decided to abbreviate it to LUT University because otherwise no one would be able to say the name. But it's a university in Finland. And I have a research group that looks into the sustainability and accessibility of video games. So making sure that games are inclusive and playable by a wide range of people as much as possible. And I got my PhD from Finland a few years ago. And before that, I studied in the German university in Cairo. So originally I'm Egyptian. Some Egyptians are blonde, it happens. And generally, I am mostly a games researcher. So I started with researching games and gamification. These are some of the games that I've researched over the years. So you might recognize Animal Crossing. It was kind of a hit during the pandemic. Ring Fit Adventure was also a hit during the pandemic. The Witcher. It's okay if you don't recognize any of these, but do you actually recognize any of them? Like any okay. Yeah, it doesn't it's not important. But so in today's talk, there are two components that I would like to talk about. Um, Representation of people with disabilities. Oh yeah, The Witcher, definitely. Yes, I haven't finished The Witcher yet. I kind of gave up at 80%, I think, but I want to go back to it. So two components to today's talk, games and media, and then representation of people with disabilities in games and media. And I will start with the first part, and I will kind of focus more on games, given that this is my research background, but you will see other forms of media, television and series, and also books being reflected upon. So games, why do we care about games? Like, or why should we think? Because if we're talking about the representation of people with disabilities, why does it really matter if we look at games and how people are represented there? It is for several reasons. The main of which is that games have now become a mainstream form of media in the same way that TV is and movies are and all of the other forms of media. And so kind of in the same way that we have dedicated attention to representation across these medias, we also need to dedicate that attention to representation in games. The games specifically during the pandemic, they were already a big product. Like they started being a niche product that basically people in the early 1980s and 1970s, people in MIT started developing games and other universities just as a hobby for them and as a way for them to show their programming skills. Like it was kind of a competition as to who could program a better game or who could score a higher score. So it was a very niche product just for geeks. And then now we see that it is a mainstream product and it has birthed other things like games, gamification, serious games, and exercise games. So it's kind of interwoven in other aspects of life other than entertainment. It's part of exercise, it's part of education, it's part of socialization. And so it's not just a niche product that you sit at night on your couch and just consume in a TV is. And I don't mean niche in TV is not a niche, but I mean like it's not just a limited time that you consume this media product. It's something that has become part of most apps that we interact with. So much so that some estimates put or estimate that there are 2.5 to 3 million billion gamers in the world. And actually, it's estimated that a third of those gamers have disabilities. So 15% have disabilities. Now, we don't have a confirmed number as to how many people game with a disability because this is sensitive information. Gamers do not like to share it. When they share it, they get bullied. So these are estimates based on big companies. Like when Microsoft or Sony release a game, they can see from their data how many turn accessibility settings on, and this gives them a hint as to how many people use these settings. So it's not an accurate estimate, and it's very likely like a down a lower estimation than how many gamers with disabilities we have. And during the pandemic, we have seen the rise of games as an industry. It became as big as the music and TV industry combined. There has been a slight decline since then, but it's still it is huge compared to those two other industries. Like the game industry by itself is kind of huge. Now, the thing that is especially unique about games as a media is that they are active mediums. So when now, this is kind of debatable because when you read a book, you use your imagination, and that is kind of, you are active in that sense. But with games, you are enacting your imagination. So you are the character. If you're playing Super Mario, you are Super Mario. You're going to save the princess. You're getting hit by other. I think there were turtles in Super Mario. So it's you're holding the controller in your hand and you're acting the activities, and that can make games more impactful on people compared, like in comparison to TV and other and books. This is, like I said, is debatable. For some people books are more impactful, but that is the unique aspect here. That is why games sort of get this attention and why representation and actions we do in games are important. And that is why we have the whole conversation around games and violence. And I will not get into details in this because this is not my research area, but usually when I start talking about games being an active form of acting things, people then want to ask this question, well, then do games lead to violence? And what I can say is that there is no conclusive evidence as to that. There was maybe 2 studies, more or less, probably more, in the 90s that would make people play a violent game, and then they would sort of provoke those people, like someone would come and hit the research participants, or like annoy them in some way, and they would see how people would react. And people who consumed violent games will tend to react more violently. But then, is it like a correlation? Is it a causation? This was not clear. And the important thing is that when now people have tried to replicate these studies, so they would do the same study with the same method, with the same sampling procedure and everything, we do not get the same outcomes. So earlier studies currently do not replicate. And that is why we are in a space where we really don't know. There is some evidence to the idea of desensitization, which we see in most media. Like if you watch violent movies a lot, you kind of get used to violence. Unfortunately, that's part of the human psyche. So there is evidence to that, to the desensitization effect. But sort of, do games lead to violence? It's actually, we have more concrete evidence for the opposite. Like we have concrete experiments that have been replicated showing that when someone is angry at their boss, for example, and they come home and they take that anger out on a virtual imagined character, or in the safe environment of a game, that is an outlet for them, and that helps them manage their mental health and remain
Lubna,
calmer.
can I ask a
Yeah,
question?
Maha, sure.
Because I mean, I was just thinking because the Olympics are on, so I always make connections. And I think originally these kinds of things were war, and then they became sports that you do in a friendly competition. And I
Hmm.
always think about this like a lot of sports are pretty violent, like boxing, or
True.
even ones that aren't that violent. And I think we tend to think that this is an outlet, right? We don't tend to think of them as things that promote
Mm,
violence. We don't think that people who play martial arts are necessarily more violent than other people, although if they decide to be violent, they'll hurt people more. But
true.
it's supposed to be an outlet, right? So I don't know if the research on that has been done or if it's just an assumption.
The
But
research on
then with
games being an outlet, that has been done
but
a lot.
sports, I'm saying the connection, but
I
I
don't
think
know.
video games and sports are like
Probably.
what you just said about taking it out on a video game. People do that with sports, right? Like they go to the gym and take their energy out, or they go and box an inanimate object instead of boxing a human being, right? And they say that
Yeah.
that helps. I was just wondering if that research is there.
I haven't read it directly, but I feel like from talking with therapists, it does make sense. Like I
Mhm.
feel they often recommend playing a sport to help regulate yourself. So I would think it's out there.
Veronica says that they used
Yeah.
to massacre entire population in this game called Koopa Troopas, but they're not aggressive in real life, apparently.
Yeah. And that is the last point that I have here, is that why are we making the assumption that people would transfer this behavior? Like they can kill turtles in a game, but then help them in real life. Like it doesn't. Usually people can make this distinction, and the fact that they do something in game doesn't mean that they would do it in real life. But okay, I'm happy that we agree on that. Does anyone want to share something at this point, or a question? Okay. But yeah, I'm happy that we agree on the games on violence. This usually is a more controversial topic than this. But so yeah, and there are also other forms of games that are not violent. So like just focusing on violence and ignoring them is not really a good idea. I'm a very bad yes. Oh yeah. Yeah, there was a game where I got the reputation of being very good at it because I could lie. And actually, it's not that I was lying. I really didn't know what I was doing in the game. So I would tell people, oh, I didn't do this in the game. And I seriously would think that I didn't do it. But actually, it would turn out that it was me who killed the other person anyway. But yeah. So Animal Shelter Simulator is a game where basically you take care of animals. You find owners for them in a shelter, in an animal shelter. Candy Crush, Animal Crossing, like all of these are not violent games. This is Final Fantasy, and I have no idea what happens in Final Fantasy. Like for me, visually, this is very hard to make out or to understand what's happening. But then the nice thing about Final Fantasy, if you understand how to play it, is that you get a character and you start to develop that character. Like you start to develop their stats, their intelligence, their strength, and so on. And that has been used in some experiments, like on a smaller scale, to see if this can teach young children in school to understand that if you put in effort and develop your intelligence, then your character will get stronger, and then you can get a better job and more candy, and in however metaphor they used it. And it's helpful because that makes the value of education more concrete to children when it's mapped against a game, and they can see what happens when a character has more intelligence. Danny's saying, when I was a kid, I played a game that was like a surgery simulator. I was really bad at doing surgery. Yeah, yeah. I'm happy then that you're not Dr. Death in real life. Currently one of the most popular games internationally, and it's so funny to see like matcha men streaming themselves playing this game, is Supermarket Simulator, where literally your job is to sit and just as a cashier and cash people out. And all day you're just scanning products and it goes ding, 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 and it's the most satisfying thing ever. And I think this is why it went viral. And you also stock the shelves here in the background, and consumers come and pick up the products. And so this is the most popular game in July, at least, and June. I probably the numbers have changed, but it's absolutely not a violent game. It's a relaxing game. So games are more complex than just being violent. But now to the topic then at hand, which is characters with disabilities. The first question is, and I kind of already answered it, is can people with disabilities play games? Does anyone want to venture sort of like a story, or have you come across a gamer with a disability in your life? Aside from Yasser, I actually don't know if Yasser plays games. I used to play this as a kid all the time. Which one, Yasmin? The Supermarket Simulator?
Yeah, the supermarket.
Aw. Okay. Yeah, I love it. I have played it far too much during this summer, but yeah. Can people with disabilities play games? Yes, and no, sort of. It's complicated. There are two approaches to disability generally, and you're probably familiar with the medical model and the social model to disability, right? Like, if you're not familiar, say no or N in chat or open your mic. Sounds good.
I think
Yeah.
describe it, Lubna, for the recording in case someone
All
who's
right.
watching the recording doesn't know.
Sounds good. So the medical model assumes or places the weight, or so the medical model says we have a person who might be deaf or blind or paralyzed. Well, let's fix this person. Let's fix this problem that they have. So the idea is to fix the disability in the person, to remedy it. Whereas with the social model to disability, the idea is that let's change society. So let's just, there is a deaf person, there is a blind person, there is a wheelchair user, they're going to be there. What can we as society do to make things easier for them? And so let's build ramps, let's use Braille everywhere, let's teach everyone sign language, things that can make the community as a whole more inclusive. Whereas the medical model focuses on let's give people glasses, let's give them wheelchairs. Both are important, in my humble opinion, because if you're paralyzed, you need a wheelchair. If you need glasses, you need glasses. But then that doesn't erase the social responsibility that things should still be accessible. There should be ramps. People should learn sign language if possible, and so on. Some games may present access barriers. Yeah. We're exploring how to incorporate VR into anatomy classes, sort of a game, but the design of the headset and the mobility requirements are present. Yes, and VR is especially hard. But yeah. Thank you, Danny. Now, when the social model and the medical model to disability are applied to the context of games, we kind of reach similar solutions where we have games that follow the medical model to disability. So in this case, if we have someone who's blind, then let's design audio games for them, kind of like audiobooks. And I'll show you an example in a second. If someone is deaf, then let's design text-based games so they can just read the text instead of needing to hear something. If they have some dexterity problem or motor skill challenge, then let's make, now this is debatable when it comes to controllers. I'm going to show you when some controllers are medical model and when they are social model, because you see it listed in both sides. So in the social model also, there are certain controllers that can give people with motor disabilities greater access. So what I'm trying to say is that the medical model develops games specifically for people with disabilities, and it's kind of like, hey, this is the thing that I've made for you. Take it and sit there in a corner and play with it by yourself, because this is your game. Whereas the social model to disability says that there are mainstream games that are played in the mainstream, and those games should still be playable by everyone with a disability. It should not be like just a special audio game. It should be that a game like The Witcher that we mentioned earlier is playable by everyone. And I'm going to show you how that looks like. Is yes or okay? I stopped playing games because of the exclusion present within gaming environments. Yep. Yeah. Certain games, yeah. That is the main issue. It's a very limited selection of games that people with disabilities have access to. So let me show you some examples for the medical model, and then we will go into the social model. So the audiobooks, this is a real game. If you would like to play it, it's called The Blind Legend. It's an interesting experience. If you have never tried audio games, it's an experience. So it's an audiobook. You're listening, like, for example, for people who can see here, like there is this scene, like there is this woman, for example, she's coming down the stairs, there are enemies, and the enemies are shooting something at her. So then your audio game would describe the scene to you, as if it's a book. Like, you are walking down the stairs, it's dark, it's cold, there are enemies standing at the end, you see them, their health is very good, they're shooting guns at you. What it doesn't ask you what do you do, but basically it is asking you what do you do, and then you just with your keyboard you can choose right, left, or A or D depending on what keyboard or what controls you're using, and that is the gaming experience. Now, what happens with audio games is that developers would just make an audio game like a blind legend. The game, it's a black screen. Like it is literally this black screen, and it tells you put on your headphones and play the game. What happens then is that sighted people, for them, this is not engaging because they want to engage their sight as well, and they are used to engaging their sight as well. And so they don't play these games. They want a visual game like this one, where you can see the enemies and you can walk downstairs yourself. So the social model to disability would then say that every game should come with an audio narration that narrates like I did now. You're walking down the stairs, it's cold, there are enemies, blah, blah, blah. This is doable, and it has happened in a lot of, not a lot, in some mainstream games. I'm going to show you an example in a bit, but it's not implemented a lot yet. And a part of the issue is technological, but a part of it is really that developers don't want to invest time and money in doing this because they think it's not going to get them revenue. And that is debatable because now the data shows that if you actually make accessible games, people are going to play it. So there is money to be made. It's just about changing developers' perspective about that. The issue technologically is that games are very dynamic. So then, like you see here, there are like shards flying. There is smoke everywhere. This is created dynamically, and so the audio would have to also be created dynamically. So then that would be AI. Like it would be an AI that is dynamically describing the environment. And as you know, AI nowadays is not really that brilliant yet. It's going there hopefully, but it's not there yet. So technologically, that is the barrier that we have. But I really think it's the commitment from the developers more than anything. Again, if you want to interrupt me at any point, yes, there is a comment. I find that a problem is that often these fixes can create other disabling factors, overload to add the script, or a game where the skill is visual, e.g. hide and seek type of games where you need to find and click on objects. I definitely agree with you. And it definitely should be something that you can turn on and off. There's like the thing is that we have accessibility guidelines that would, for example, tell people if you add this setting, make it something that people can turn off so it's not overloading them. How many people know about these guidelines? Are these guidelines updated? Like VR, for example, doesn't really have accessibility guidelines at the moment. So that's also part of the issue, is that we need to create standards for how to integrate accessibility, and that will take time. But yes, definitely, Danny. Yeah. The other example is text-based games. So I don't actually know what, and this creates more disabling conditions. Yep, I agree. A text-based game is like, I don't know what game this is, but it like there is text on the screen. It tells you you're walking in a forest. If you go north, press Y. If you want to go east or west, sorry, press. Oh, sorry. If you want to go north, press up. If you want to go west, press left. I'm visually impaired, so things like this happen. And then again, this is not really engaging. Some people actually like these text-based games. Like there is a huge fandom for some of them, and like there are fanatics about these games. But again, it's not engaging. It's not something that will really become mainstream. What I meant with some controllers can be a medical approach to gaming is something like this controller. So this is an Exerium chair, and there is a stick, and you're sitting on a chair, and then you're there's like a stick in front of you connected to the chair. There are two handles to the stick, and when you sway right with the chair, then your character in game sways right, and when you like sway left, it sways left. So you're moving your body with the chair right and left, and that moves your character in game. This is a solution for some type of disabilities, like some cognitive disabilities. This is a really good solution because you want the person to be contained. If they move, then they might wander somewhere where they can get in danger. So then you want them to just be focused on this thing. So in certain situations, this is helpful. But the issue with solutions like this is that how many people are going to buy a chair like this for their house? How expensive is it? It's there are more barriers to acquire this solution. But it is a solution, and it has situations where it is useful. Right.
And
now,
how many disabilities as well? Like how many? If like some disabilities can move their hands and legs and such, like it benefits the blind community. It benefits maybe the hearing, the deaf community. But for some, like for people who are in wheelchairs, then some people have like things related to the muscles, and then they cannot
True.
really move their entire body. So it creates problems and things related to the disablement, and then we'll turn to the models again, saying, okay, we're now creating something by society like that is not accessible for all. And then for non-disabled people, how they're gonna engage with the same game? Like, is it like compatible with the chair as well, or with the tool, or with whatever, and it's compatible with the mouse and all the like the technologies that allow disabled people to engage with non-disabled people. It's very complicated. So yeah,
it creates other forms of exclusion. Thank you for mentioning those. Thank you. Now, the other side of making games playable, the social model, which is praised for being very good. It provides a lot of access. Now, so the first like major thing as part of the social model that provides access is adaptive controllers. So a game controller, I hope like most people are familiar with it. You hold it with both of your hands usually. It weighs something. If you carry it for half an hour or so or longer, it can create a strain on your muscle, especially if you have some muscle atrophy. And it requires dexterity, like you need to press on a specific button. Sometimes you need to press on like 3 buttons in a weird configuration. Like controllers are horrible. They're really bad. Now, an adaptive controller, like the one on screen, it uses wheels. So you place your full hand on a circle, and the circle moves like a wheel, and you move your entire hand. So it doesn't need you to be hyper specific with pressing on a certain button. It's easy, like this movement is easier for some people than holding something. Like you're not placing the weight on your hand for half an hour or an hour. And the nice thing about this controller is that you can also add another, or you can add countless attachments to it. So like in this picture, the person is using more of a joystick, which you hold it in your fist, and then you move it right and left, and to control your game character. So then you can add any of your accessories that are maybe more comfortable for you to use. This is more adaptable than a chair, like the chair that I showed you here, because the chair has one configuration, it's bulky, you take it or leave it. Whereas this, it's adaptive, like it's called an Xbox adaptive controller. That is part of the name. It's not, it is expensive, like it's around $300 for gaming standards. It's not expensive, but it's for normal people standards. It is still expensive. So it not very accessible, I would say. But in terms of making games playable, this has helped a lot of people to play more games. And this can be connected to any Xbox. And then once you connect it to your Xbox, then you can connect it to any game that is compatible with this controller. Whereas the chair, you can just play the games that would work on this machine. So it's a step forward. Can be better, but it's a step forward. Animal Crossing, mentioned it a few times. Animal Crossing uses big graphics for low vision people, so it's easy for you to make out that this is a person, this is a tree. The colors are vivid. There is high contrast. This is I have never played this game, and I don't think it got really famous. But Ratchet and Clank, I guess. You can adjust the contrast settings so that this is what the game usually appears like with the default contrast settings. You can turn some settings on that would highlight to you that, hey, this is you are the character in green, and like this is the area that you should go to. It's kind of more purple than the other areas. You can even turn on further settings, and then it would show you more clearly, hey, everything is black, but this purple square is where you need to go. So by increasing contrast, it shows you more information. This is The Last of Us 2. It does a similar thing. So you are the character in blue. Your enemies are in red. This is a weapon that you can use in yellow. Everything else is black. So it simplifies the layout for people to be able to see what could be an interesting part of the game to interact with. The Last of Us 2 is especially praised because it has this audio narration that I described to you earlier. So there have been fully blind people who managed to play the game. It's also compatible with the Xbox Adaptive Controller. It also has text description for everything that happens in game. So it's an example of, like, if you want to do it, if you want to make a game accessible and mainstream, you can do it. What about if someone doesn't have any perception of colors? Yeah, that's a good question. I think there is a setting that uses that on top of the color, it would add like a square for, sorry, a triangle. I said a square and drew a triangle. Like it would draw a triangle over if that is you, and then a square over the character that is your enemy. But I haven't played it myself. That's a good catch. Yes. But my understanding is that it does exist. But yeah. Now, what I want to then, which is the main point of the talk today, is to talk about characters with disabilities or representation of people with disabilities. Because so far, like a game like The Last of Us, like really the amount of praise it has received. And there was also another one, it was God of War, that won an award for an like the most recognizable international award for game accessibility. It won it because also it was playable by almost everyone with a disability. That's what the media says. Double check me on this. Yet in both games, like these are accessible games. You have considered people with disabilities. Yet in both games, the representation of disability was not nice, and it left people unhappy when they played the game, which is kind of like you don't really think like it gives me the feeling that developers didn't really think about what they were doing. Like they just followed an old story script without critically examining what the story was telling. But let's continue to see what that looks like. There's usually this game that I play with people. It probably would not work with this crowd because this crowd is smart, but usually I show these 4 pictures and I ask you to tell me, in your opinion, which of these is a person who has a disability, in your opinion, without any other information, like just based on the visuals. So we can still play it. You can write or say out loud, is it A, B, C, or D, or all of them, or none? These are your options. All of them, Veronica. Okay, she got a thumbs up from Danny. All of them from Irene. Yeah, this is a smart crowd. Yes, so actually, yeah, all of them are characters with, or like people, not characters, with disabilities. This is Molly Burke. I want you to pay attention to how visually they are different, I think, to a certain extent. Like Molly Burke is the most person who doesn't show that quote unquote looking blind standard. She's blind, but she has pink hair. She's a fashion and a fashion YouTuber. She loves fashion and makeup, and she talks about that a lot. She's also an accessibility advocate. So I always use her as an example, or show her as an example to show that, hey, being blind doesn't really have a look. And yeah, Molly Burke. I can't remember this person's name. I think he was a chef on YouTube, but I'm blanking out on his name. More of a traditional look because he's wearing black sunglasses, so that kind of usually clues student as to, yeah, this person is blind, whereas Molly Burke is not, which that is exactly my point. They're all blind. This is a person, number B, or person B is using a cane, so that is also an indicator visually that they are blind. This is Sawyer, I think Mike Sawyer, if I remember correctly. He's a gamer. I think it's Tommy Edison. Yeah. This person is Tommy Edison. This is Mike Sawyer, if I remember correctly, and he's a low vision person. So what I'm trying to show is they kind of disability looks different. On the other hand, these are characters from games. Which of them are disabled? A, B, C, and D, or all, or none? You can, is someone gonna type in the chat, or should I? Okay. Veronica is thinking. Enabled differently. How, Irene, do you want to expand on that if you're able? Because that's an interesting answer. And
I don't want to explain that. I play a bit of games, but I watch a lot when my son plays, and I realize that you might see a character and think that they have a disability, but then you find that they're actually enabled differently, and in either the sight or the movement is not a big deal for them. So I would not call them with disability, I'm
like they have other skills.
Yeah, or they, yeah.
Or they look blind, but they actually are sighted.
Yes, they but they are enabled in a way in the game that they can actually, if it's a blind person or a blind character, they can actually see in a different way. So it's always hard for me to say that these characters are have disabilities in games.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point, because okay, so the game kind of still, even if they look like they have a disability, the game removes the disability in a way or another. That's
yes,
I would agree.
Yes.
I would agree. Thank you. That's a very interesting point. And I like how you phrased it, enabled differently, because I had not phrased it like this. So thank you.
I had it from Maha and Yafa. So
thank you, Maha. And yes. Okay, Danny is saying this actually gives me pause on the last question. If we look at the social model, it's the environment in games. The environment is different. They may be visually impaired, but yeah, so that is kind of what Irene is saying. They may be visually impaired, but like the game doesn't make them so. Okay, this is a smart group. I really like all of you. Okay, what the point that I wanted to make from this slide is that, so technically these characters are all blind, but are they disabled or not? That's a very valid question. They're okay. So this is a monster, character C. It's literally a monster. It's a zombie, and the story is that they got infected, and their infection kept getting worse. So they became a zombie, and then it kept getting worse. That they started to develop this tumor, and then the tumor covers their eyes. So then, because the tumor covers their eyes from the outside, like a shell sort of thing, then they cannot see. And this character comes in this game, in The Last of Us 1 and 2. The game that was praised for being accessible, for being playable by low vision people, by blind people, all of that, is the same game that has all monsters basically being people with disabilities, or monsters with disabilities, however we want to call them. But the main characters of the game, the heroes that we play as, are all able-bodied, and they don't seem to have like any disability kind of being presented physically or mentally or anything. So that is the first issue I take with the social model of access, because in games, because they forget that this has to be reflected on the stories and on the characters. As for characters,
don't you think that this is ableist enough
It
to
is.
say, like in a way that, okay, and I will just ask you another question, if you may allow me. Like the games that, or the character that we play with, are able-bodied while the
Yes.
representation is disabled. So
Yeah.
it's just like a double standard, like you're using like a dual standard in your making of the game. And then this leads me to the question of, are games subject to evaluation in accordance with some standards like the WCAG, Web Content Accessibility Guidelines? And I understand that games are not web-based, so we
Yes.
cannot really take the poor model, which is the perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, in a way that we cannot take it like to use it to test a game. But is there something in accessibility design? I haven't researched games before, which is something that I would be interested to do. But it's always a question in mind that, oh, if we want to bring people with disabilities with their non-disabled peers, then we have to design something like an evaluation tool with which we can test these games. So do you have a take on this?
Yes, two main takes. There are no evaluation tools, unfortunately. The thing about games is that they are classified as entertainment products, and so all the accessibility guidelines do not apply to games, because they're entertainment. They're not important. You can entertain yourself other ways, which I take issue with, of course, because you should have access to entertainment to begin with, number one. And number two, games are more than entertainment. Like educational games are not accessible to something like Duolingo. It's the language learning app used by, it's a mainstream, not accessible if you have dexterity issues or low vision people. And I actually don't know if it's compatible with screen readers, but many issues. So no regulation applies. And there was another take that I had, which I don't remember. Right, it will come to me. It was in a future slide, I think. Yeah. Informally, however, let me see, it was if you want sort of a tool for you to evaluate if what kind of characters are you building in a game. So researchers have developed this as a guideline. So if you, regardless of regulations, like if you want to build more accountability for yourself, or if you want to ask developers to be accountable, then these are some guidelines, like question guidelines that you can use. So who has the agency in the game? Is it the character with disability or the able character? Who is present? As in, is there women present, queer people, disabled people, so on? Who is the active character and who is the passive? Who is the silent and who has a voice? So these are, yeah, and is the character positive or negative? Because there can be disabled characters, but then if they're always the villain, that's also not cute, I would say. So this is a research tool informally, and I think this is also used in literature. The same set of questions to look into how characters are being built. Does that answer your question? And I'm having a look on chat. B data and in the context of Danny's comment on social environment. Yep. Okay. I have sort of 9 minutes left, so I'm gonna try to briefly go through the examples of the representation issues that we have. So when we have disabilities in games, we see them, first of all, usually these are the characters that we see in games. Usually people want to be the hero because that is a standard of how things go. Sometimes we like the villains. Sometimes we like to see to be the villain. Like Disney villains, for example, are having a moment right now. So the villain character is also like kind of in a spotlight. It's an interesting character. So these are the characters we see. There was a study that tried to analyze or to look at how people with disabilities are seen in games. They are almost never the hero, at least in the sample that this person analyzed. They are usually the passive characters. They are there to show that a certain restriction is being put on the character, on the hero, if it's the hero. However, the hero is so amazing and capable, they are able to overcome their disability. So it's kind of it's not used. The disability is not used for what it is. It's an ableism device, I would kind of say. Or on the other hand, if it's a villain, then it's used to sacrifice the villain's humanity, to show how like they are inhuman and like rude to people, or disgusting, or they keep swearing at everyone, or why they turned to be evil because they had an accident and now they use a wheelchair, or whatever. And that is bad. Like we don't see a character with a disability that is a main character or that is a positive character, at least in this sample. And I personally, I don't really play games a lot that much anymore, but I haven't, outside of the study, I haven't seen a character with a disability in an empowering role. And then you have how the stereotypes go, is that instead of telling a story about like personal conflict and this character grew up poor, or I don't know, they then tried something and they failed, instead of this story building, you simply go to this character has mental illness. So this is a game, Life is Strange, where after searching the evil character's room, you come across pills, and the pills had a name. They were called Panadol, for example, pills that are actually used by people with schizophrenia, and a doctor's note saying, oh, Nathan, his situation is really getting bad. And that is why Nathan is evil, because he has schizophrenia. I'm sorry, I'm gonna not have a look on the chat for a while because I want to mention those few things, and we're kind of running out of time. So that is not good. So it's used as a shortcut rather than to build a complex character that is maybe struggling with themselves or trying to overcome some aspects of their humanity, or I don't know, but not using it as a shortcut is not a nice thing. It's used as to make the player feel more able. So it's used in this way. Like, for example, this is from a movie. You see someone who's blind standing with their cane, you go to help them cross the street, and then you immediately understand that this character in this movie, oh, is so generous and so polite and so amazing and blah blah blah. So it's to make you feel good about a character, or in a game to make you feel good about yourself. So this is in The Witcher. Everyone in The Witcher is rude to Geralt because he's basically a mutant. But you as the player, you are playing Geralt, and probably you start to identify with Geralt and to feel good about you being able to accept Geralt. So then it is his mutation is used to make you feel good, like about accepting him. The Witcher is not really a bad example because he does struggle with being having this mutation, and it's complex. But then this situation where it's just the person with a disability is there for you to cross them the street, that is really it becomes about the player or about the viewer feeling good about themselves rather than about understanding the person who's using the cane. Monsters, we talked about this. So then just give the monster a disability and then you understand why this monster is a monster. It's, yeah, they have a tumor covering their eyes. Now they're evil. To create remarkable heroes that are basically inspiration porn. So that is the last stereotype. Daredevil, blind, fully blind, somehow fights crime. It's enabled in a different way, like truly. So these are like not some of the stereotypes that we can see. In the last 3 minutes, what I can say to do better is basically the checklist that I showed you, the questions that could be asked. So who's present? What are they doing? Do we have people with disabilities? Are they active? And if I could leave, like there are different resources that you can, like YouTube channels that you can consume content from. So Wheels on Heels. This is a wheelchair user, Molly Burke. You all probably, you seem to know her, a few of you. Living Well with Schizophrenia. The most recent thing that I would recommend, sort of as an exposition on disability, and this is my hot take. How many here have read Fourth Wing or heard of it? Quickly in the chat, like yes or no. I haven't. Interesting. Yes. So Fourth Wing is currently, it's kind of like the new Harry Potter, some people are saying. And it is a huge thing on Book Talk, on TikTok, and all of those things. When people read the books, they focus on the fantasy part of it and the romance part of it. Read it with a disability mindset. Read it with looking at the main character. I'm not spoiling anything, so that's okay. Read it with paying attention to that Violet Sorrengail as a character is built with the same connective tissue disorder that the author Rebecca Yarros has. And then she's literally in an environment that is so hostile, trying to kill her every day. However, Violet doesn't overcome the disability. She starts to change her environment. She starts to figure out different kinds of solutions. So this is really, to me, because she's written by a woman with a disability, and so far the representation seems to be I really like it personally, at least. A lot of people don't notice that this book has like some disability in it, but yeah, like my final recommendation is sort of more characters like Violet and if you're going to read Fourth Wing, keep that in mind, and it might improve or change the experience. All right, 1 minute left. Any questions? And I'm scrolling through the chat. Our Office of Feed. Yeah, yeah, pictures are, yeah. All right. Thank you so much. I'm happy that I managed to get through the key points, and I'm really happy that like you all gave me very interesting food for thought. So thank you so much for this session.